If you had to speedrun The Legend of Zelda: The Minish Cap, how would you go about it? Over the past 19 years, the answer to that question has evolved in many ways that no one could imagine, and today I want to tell you about the discoveries that transformed the Minish Cap any percent run into what it is today. Before we get into that, I want to talk to you about today's sponsor, Opera GX. Opera GX is the browser that's made specifically for you and I. You know, the people who are massive gamers. This browser has a ton of features that put it above the competition, like GX Control, allowing you to limit the amount of CPU or RAM the browser is using. So if you're like me and you keep like 50 tabs open for no reason at all, your browsing performance would not be impacted. That's not all though, because Opera GX has GX mods which allow you to customize your browser with a ton of cool stuff. There's custom backgrounds, background music, and my personal favorite, the most annoying sounds to ever grace your eardrums. Now, if that interests you, you should check out operagx.gg/Dr. Swellman. Now, for the rest of you who are still on the edge, if you're worried about losing all of your bookmarks and preferences and all that stuff, don't worry, Opera GX's quick import tool has you covered, letting you quickly import all of your settings from your old, wimpy, lame, dumb browser. Try Opera GX for free right now and help me secure that bag by going to operagx.gg/Dr. Swellman or click the link below. Thanks again to Opera GX for sponsoring this video. Now that I've gotten my daily dose of corporate shilling out of the way, let's quickly go over Minish Cap's story and route for those who might be unfamiliar. The game starts with Princess Zelda fetching the main character Link to join her in an event called the Picori Festival. The blacksmith Link is staying with also wants him to deliver a sword to the Minister of Hyrule Castle, which is going to be presented to the winner of this year's sword fighting tournament. The winner of this tournament also has the privilege of touching the Picori blade, which was used long ago to seal a great evil inside of a treasure chest. Unsurprisingly, after the sword is delivered and the award ceremony commences, the winner is revealed to be Vati, an evil mage who is looking for a powerful magic called the Light Force. Thinking that it lies within the sealed chest, Vati breaks it, unleashing an unspeakable evil upon the land. He also turns Zelda to stone since she has powers which could interfere with this search. In response to this, King Daltus sends Link on a quest to find the Picori and with it a way to reforge the Picori blade. This requires Link to gather 4 elements from 4 different dungeons across Hyrule. The first one is found by going to the Minish Woods, finding the Minish Village, and exiting out the back of it. This leads Link to the Deepwood Shrine, the first of the dungeons. All dungeons are similar in concept, solving puzzles, getting keys to open doors, collecting the dungeon's unique equipment, and defeating enemies all to progress in some way. In addition to these dungeons having the element at the end, each one has a boss that guards it. After completing the Deepwood Shrine, defeating the boss Big Green Choo Choo, and getting the Earth element, Link needs to head to Mount Cornell for the next element, and after a short visit to Hyrule Town followed by a long climb up the mountain, Link reaches Malari's mines, where the blacksmith Malari works to repair the Picori blade. While that's happening, Link moves on to the second dungeon, the Cave of Flames. This is a longer, more difficult dungeon than the last, but the idea overall is the same. Get through the dungeon, beat the boss Gleerock, and get the element of fire. Exiting the dungeon and going back to the mines allows Link to also pick up the newly repaired White Sword, which can be infused with the power of the elements. This is done within Hyrule Castle's Elemental Sanctuary and allows Link to access the sword's cloning ability. After getting the Red Sword upgrade from the Sanctuary, the next destination is the Fortress of Winds in Castor Wilds. But unfortunately, Link can't get through the wilds without sinking in the swamp. This requires a detour to get the Pegasus boots, and is one of a couple quests needed to access the later dungeons. Getting through the Castor Wilds and the Wind Ruins brings Link to the Fortress of Winds. After defeating the boss of this area, Mazal, Link learns that the element was moved somewhere else, and instead gets an ocarina, which is the source of the game's fast travel system. This marks the start of another large detour to get the power bracelets, which allows Link to push large objects while in Minish form, and then the Flipper's key item, which allows Link to swim in bodies of water. All of this leads up to accessing the Temple of Droplets in Lake Hylia, and fighting the boss, which is a giant Octorok. After obtaining the element of water, there's another trip back to the Elemental Sanctuary to upgrade the sword to the Blue Sword, allowing Link to split into 3 copies of himself. One more detour is needed before reaching the final element, which involves getting to the Royal Valley and completing that area, giving Link access to a special door in Vale Falls, leading to the Cloud Tops in the Palace of Winds. After a long dungeon and a fight with the boss, the Georg pair, Link obtains the wind element, the final one needed to fully power up his sword to the Force Sword. Once he gets this sword, Vati ambushes Link and transforms Hyrule Castle into Dark Hyrule Castle. This is the final dungeon of the game and ends with the 3-part boss fight against Vati. All in all, the game's casual route looks like this, and for the most part, that's what the route looked like for speedruns in the early days of the game. This era of routing up until 2014 has been dubbed by the Minish Cap speedrunning community as the Legacy Era, and encompasses several of the many changes that we'll be talking about in this video. Unfortunately, the only run that was completed during that time was removed. It turned out that the runner in question faked many of their runs by splicing footage together and submitted them as if they were legitimate. This one was unfortunately no exception. On a lighter note, it wasn't long before the first major glitches were discovered, warping what was a glitchless run for the first couple years into something almost unrecognizable. In November of 2007, a German glitch hunter by the name of Pika9323 would create his YouTube channel and start uploading videos of exploits he'd find in the European version of the Minish Cap. Most of these were minor exploits that had little to no bearing on the run, but there was one which laid the foundation for every any % speedrun going forward. After completing the Fortress of Winds, you get the ocarina I talked about earlier. When using the ocarina, the game goes into a state where everything around Link is frozen, except for him playing the ocarina. Pika found out that if you moved into a door that transitioned to another screen, like a set of stairs, and used the ocarina exactly 1 frame later, something weird would happen. If you interrupted the animation of Link using the ocarina, the game would remain in the state as if he was still playing it. This includes the removal of much of the game's collision, allowing the player to go out of bounds if done correctly. This also allows players to walk over tiles they normally fall into, like pits or deep water. However, using the ocarina glitch requires some knowledge that players should be aware of. Like Shrek or an onion, Minish Cap's rooms are separated into layers. What areas you can traverse while using the ocarina glitch depend on what layer you're on, and typically in dungeons, you need to be on a layer above the lower layer's wall to take full advantage of the out-of-bounds movement. There's also several other restrictions based on what state the game is in from the ocarina glitch. The first state of the glitch is while you're in the same room as when it was performed, and this state is extremely volatile, with several actions causing the game to soft lock. When moving to another room by scrolling the map, or the act of dying and getting revived by a fairy, the glitch switches to a second state. This removes the soft locks that happen in the first state and lets players use the glitch more freely. While it would take a long time for the community to harness the true potential of the ocarina glitch, it quickly removed a couple of annoying points in the speedrun. For these, we'll be taking a look at a runner named Greenalink and his old individual dungeon runs he posted on YouTube starting in late 2007. In the Temple of Droplets, Greenalink used the ocarina glitch to bypass getting the boss key in the first part of the dungeon, quickly running into the main chamber with the water element. He still had to do most of the dungeon after that, but with the additional use of the ocarina glitch, he was able to clear the entirety of Temple of Droplets in less than 15 minutes. The use after this, and arguably the biggest one to this day, is a way to skip the entirety of Royal Valley in the Cloud Tops. One of the main gimmicks of Minish Cap are kinstones. The idea is that you have half of a complete stone and you find the other NPCs to fuse them with to complete them. This unlocks various secrets throughout the game, and fusing with a particular stranger in Hyrule Town happens to be the most important one for the speedrun. His fusion unlocks a warp up to the end of the Cloud Tops where the Wind Tribe lives. Normally, players wouldn't be able to get onto the roof as this area is blocked off until you complete the Cloud Top section before this. With the ocarina glitch, a couple of uses can let players bypass the NPCs blocking the stairs, and it allows access to the roof earlier than intended. Skipping these major areas saves about 15 minutes overall, and lets you access the Palace of Winds right after infusing the third element at the Sanctuary. This was also found in December of 2007 by Pika, showing off how massive his contributions were to the community. We're not done yet though, because there was also an ocarina glitch that can be used in Dark Hyrule Castle, letting players bypass various areas to get 4 small keys much faster than normal, cutting the time in the dungeon down immensely. This would all come together in a few runs from someone named SD2 starting in 2009. Many of these runs did not have their recordings saved, but his 2-hour, 13-minute, and 19-second time set on June 24th of 2010 still survives to this day. A tool-assisted speedrun from another runner named Tompa took this a step further and even used some more ocarina glitches not performed in SD2's run. This picked up an ocarina glitch used during the Flipper side quest, where you have to get 3 books and return them to the library. One of these books requires the power bracelets to get, but by doing an ocarina glitch in one of the other shop ceiling areas, runners can get to the other shop as the rooms are directly connected to each other, allowing for one of these books to be attained earlier and without the need of the power bracelets. Unfortunately, the power bracelets couldn't be skipped overall, as there was a room in the Palace of Winds that required their use. Tompa also used an ocarina glitch off of an outside door in Lake Hylia, allowing him to run over water to quickly reach the house with the blue book for the Flippers quest. This trick had been known for some time, originally documented by Mr. Gruns in June of 2009. Funny enough, this wasn't even what the trick was featured for. This was actually a method to get into Temple of Droplets early, all without the flippers. However, there were sections where the flippers were still needed inside the dungeon, and a way to bypass that was not found at the time. Regardless, Tompa's task finished with these newly implemented tricks with a time of 1 hour, 48 minutes, and 9 seconds in August of 2011, showing how far this route could actually go. For the next few years, this would be the gold standard for the legacy route. The main improvements would be runners improving their movement and overall execution of tricks, but other things such as implementing a real-time setup for the early green book ocarina glitch would help as well. But as 2014 progressed, there was another major glitch that finally made its way into the game, giving birth to the era of the portal items route. Back in 2009, Mr. Gruns discovered a glitch in the European version of Minish Cap, one where he was able to use items while on a Minish portal. It had no immediate applications, as no one could do the trick on the North American version, and at the time, no one in the West was running on the Japanese version. MB Rules, a top runner at the time, found a use for the glitch on August 31st of 2014. In the Fortress of Winds, there's a Minish portal right next to a wall in one of the upper rooms. It was found that if you use the mole mitts while facing a direction, it pushes you back in the opposite direction, all while still being on the portal. You can jump off from this position as well, and in this case, jumping upwards sends you into the wall. Now, this didn't push your character into the wall completely, as you would just pop out if you moved. However, if you use the knockback from a bomb at a precise time, it will knock you deeper into the wall and put you on layer 2. Something even more amazing, the room to the left of this one is the room with the boss door, and that can be skipped by simply walking into the loading zone for the upper room. This skips half the dungeon, saving about 3 minutes. Now for the best thing about this trick, it was also possible to do this on the Japanese version. Right before this was determined to be viable in runs, the best any percent times were right around the 2-hour mark. Afterwards, they would go much lower. One of the dominant names in Minish Cap speedrunning during this era was Toad's Woot, who not only held the record in several categories, but also contributed to the glitch hunting scene as well. One of his most famous finds was from a clip that was only described as Zelda lewd. Toad's Woot and many other runners would contribute to new minor glitch and strat finds, but it wouldn't be until May of 2016 where Tompa would unearth a major find with a glitch runners were very familiar with. He found out if you used an ocarina glitch on the same frame as a cutscene activates, such as defeating a mini-boss, the ocarina glitch can occur. This had massive implications for the game, as the very same day, Toad's Woot showed off a video that was the very first major skip in Palace of Winds. During a fight for a small key midway through the dungeon, the ocarina glitch can be used there to skip a required moblin fight shortly after, saving around 33 seconds. This is a very difficult trick to pull off, but if runners pause buffer to line up the timing, it becomes a little bit easier. However, this is a one-shot trick, and there's no attempting it again if you fail it. It doesn't kill a run, thankfully, unlike another ocarina glitch that would be found years later. For now, in December of 2016, some runners were starting to scratch the surface of RNG manipulation in the run. One of the first instances that was found to be viable in real time was a rupee manip at the very beginning of the run. Found by a top runner and multiple record holder named DBX, if you start the game and do specific actions at certain times, you can get a blue rupee from the pot in the house that you start in. Runners need to buy a couple of items in the run such as a bottle and a grip ring, so setting this up to get multiple rupees saves time and removes the need to get them elsewhere. It's important to note that this isn't the first time manip was attempted, as a form of manipulating the giant Octorok fight in the Temple of Droplets was found by Windmask in August of 2014. But this version of it was considered to be slow and the idea abandoned at the time. Coming up into 2017, The any percent category was getting very close to the sub 150 barrier, and it would only be a few months before the game's route would undergo yet another massive change. On April 27th of 2017, Toad's Woot would break Minish Cap in a way that fundamentally changed how runs would look going forward. When experimenting with trying to use various items one frame after using another, Toad's Woot had the idea to try it on boss key doors. More specifically, if you use R or A to open a boss door, that activates a cutscene where the door opens. By using an item mapped to the B button, this can override that cutscene, giving control back to the player. When doing this with the lantern in the Fortress of Winds, just slightly before activating the boss key door, Toad's Woot was able to bypass the transition after the door opened, letting him go out of bounds and allowing runners to now skip the second half of Palace of Winds, going straight to the boss room. Toad's Woot also had the idea to apply this in the Temple of Droplets. Before, it was impossible to skip the flippers as there was no way to reach the right side switch in the water element room without them. There were ideas floated in the past to get to the blue warp room just before the main chamber, but when trying the ocarina glitch to get there, it didn't work. At this point, runners wouldn't have the lantern to do the glitch, so the next best thing would be an item that I haven't talked about yet, and for good reason. The magic boomerang is an item that's very out of the way of a normal run. It requires 4 kinstone fusions with the Tingle NPCs spread throughout the overworld, and honestly there wasn't any thought to use it until now. By using the boomerang and holding B, then opening the boss key door, the same thing happens as it would in the Palace of Winds method. Getting to the blue warp room is a bit annoying because it does require a pixel perfect setup to get there, but doing this skips the area that Link needs to swim in. Now if you remember, there was a method found to get into the Temple of Droplets early by ocarina glitching off of a house door in Lake Hylia. This meant that the flippers could now be skipped, saving an incredible amount of time. There was another skip found as a result of skipping the flippers, using an already known ocarina glitch in the Palace of Winds. There's a puzzle in the palace that requires the power bracelets to do, and for a while, the runners would just get this item on the way to getting the flippers. By using an ocarina glitch during a mini boss fight before the puzzle, then dying and having a fairy revive you in the same room after doing the glitch, you could skip the pot pushing puzzle and replace the key you lose from not doing it with another one in the area. The upside to this is that it completely removes the Minish side questing in Hyrule Town before going to the Temple of Droplets. This can save a minute and a half if performed correctly, but there's a catch. The downside is that bracelet skip is a one-shot frame perfect trick. If you miss it, you'll lose more time than what you would save by doing it. Needless to say, this wasn't something that anyone would want to do in runs. Because of this, this era was separated into 2 routes, the flipper skip route and the bracelet skip route. That wouldn't be all, because not only would there be more strategies found by several runners to improve these glitches and setups for them, but some more new tricks would find their way into the run. One of these was a way to clip through a wall in Fortress of Winds. Using the Armos on the 3rd floor where the portal items glitch is done to reach the boss early, Toad's Woot found that by doing a precise setup and getting the Armos down to the corner, he was able to use it to clip through the wall. At this point, only a few runners had done the bracelet skip and gotten a PB with it. But even with that, both routes had top times that were within a minute of each other. This came from both optimizations in executing the glitches and having better movement in the run overall. There were even more manipulations being implemented in 2019, such as a fast octo minute for the boss in the Temple of Droplets, allowing for something called a zero ink boss fight. Then there was a minute for the Dark Nuts, Vati 1 and Vati 2 fights in the Dark Hyrule Castle. However, another route was around the corner, and right after the SGDQ 2019 Minish Cap run, a glitch hunter by the name of Solidified Gaming would shake up the game by finding an exploit that would finally affect an early game dungeon. From 2019 to 2021, this route dominated Minish Cap speedrunning, and it was known as the Warble Hop route. Found in July of 2019 by Solidified Gaming, she showed that if you jumped into a hole, you could hop out at a diagonal angle. This part of the trick was already discovered by Pika9323, but she was able to do a few more things with it. If you face the direction you did the angle hop in, then slash and charge your sword to remain facing that way, then move back towards the hole, you can use the cane of Pocky and charge your sword again and hop into the hole, then hold the angled direction again to perform an angled cane of Pocky jump. Normally this isn't possible, but this exploit happens thanks to something called angle retention. To keep this glitched diagonal facing value, Link can't change his facing direction. Doing so updates that directional value to a non-glitched value. Doing something like holding out the sword retains this, and it can be used to break the game in some very interesting ways. The very first version of this was used as a boss key door skip in Cave of Flames. In the room with the door, a diagonal cane of Pocky jump can be used to get on layer 2, then with some specific screen transitions and movement, players can get into the room just behind the boss door. The other, and just as impactful location for this glitch is found in the Palace of Winds. Instead of having to do the bracelet skip with the Ocarina glitch like in a previous route, a warble hop could be done in the room where a small key was needed previously, and runners could get on layer 2 to grab another key. From there, they could navigate back to that room, then warble hop again to skip the door in that room. This let runners use that one key to unlock the room with the boss key chest, then they could just use the boss key door glitch to get into the boss room. This lowered the barrier to entry at the top level by a ton, and made the Palace of Winds one of the best dungeons to speedrun. Like many routes before this one, as soon as the glitches were implemented, the records came down fast. Within the month, top runners were pushing their any percent times down, with Toad's Woot and another runner named Vlack getting the time well under 1 hour and 40 minutes. While all of this was really cool, Solidified Gaming wasn't done with her work into angle retention. In one of the rooms where you could push a statue in the Cave of Flames, she found that you could do an angle retention exploit in a nearby hole, make your way back to the pillar, then pull it in to get some interesting results. Angle retention lets you pull the object in a diagonal direction. Not only that, but when pulling the objects, the game expects the object to be where Link originally was. This means that the game only checks if Link can pull the object without being blocked by collision, and not the object itself. Runners can use this to pull objects through walls, but that's not all. If you pull an object using this method into a loading zone, the object destroys the loading zone, which allows Link to go out of bounds from that position. In this room, it results in minecart skip, saving a small key and removing some backtracking to get another key in the dungeon. This is a good time save, but there's one more use for this in the Cave of Flames that was found by a runner named Z-Nubs. In the room with 4 rollabites and the switch pillar, it was found that if you use the gust jar to put a rollabite in the wall at a specific point, do angle retention to pull the pillar out of the bottom left corner diagonally, line up the pillar to just under the rollabite, do angle retention again to get it pulled into the wall, and finally do another angle retention and grab the pillar from the bottom, you could clip up onto layer 2 and more quickly skip the boss door. Combine this with improved manips such as the quad kinstone manip and caster wilds found by Vlack, this run was becoming more and more trick heavy rather than focused on movement alone. In March of 2021, Solidified Gaming would find some other glitches that resulted in massive skips during the early mid-game. This began the era of one of the routes that's still used to this day, the P-Hat clip route. In Caster Wilds, it was found that one of the walls on the upper area bridge was placed incorrectly by the developers. It was placed in a way that left a very small gap. While players couldn't walk through it, it was possible to get pushed through if they had something that could do so. This is where Solidified Gaming got the idea for using a nearby P-Hat that was below the raised area. Normally, the P-Hat could never get up there, but it was found that if you used the gust jar and pulled the P-Hat without entirely sucking it in, the P-Hat could be moved to the upper area. With the P-Hat stunned, it was simple to move it into position by the left side fence and roll into it. This let Link get onto layer 2 and allowed runners to now skip all of Caster Wilds, including the gold kinstone fusions required to get into Wind Ruins. Not only that, but Wind Ruins could now be skipped and runners could go directly to Fortress of Winds, saving several minutes. This clip started a chain reaction of runners looking for more ways to clip through various walls in the game, and it wouldn't be long before the next clip was found. Solidified Gaming found another clip right after completing the Cave of Flames called Krenel Clip. Normally, runners would need to descend Mount Krenel, go to the Elemental Sanctuary to get the red sword in their first clone, then go just outside Caster Wilds to activate a trigger that starts the Pegasus Boots quest. By using an already existing glitch called Bottle Invincibility, which involves using a bottle with something in it, then interrupting that with something like reading a sign, you become invulnerable to damage as long as you don't perform certain actions like rolling. By luring a rock beetle down to the lower right of the screen, lining yourself up on a specific pixel above the climbable wall, you can hold out your sword and move to the right into that bit of collision, and the rock beetle will begin to push into you. And after the rock beetle stops moving and sits, the resulting push from it pushes you out of bounds. I'm simplifying this by a lot, but the trick involves taking advantage of Link's push value when trying to push an object. Myth197 has an excellent tutorial on this that goes into much more detail if you'd like to know more. This not only saves time by skipping the red sword and going straight to this point, but there's also a Vati cutscene that only plays when you have the red sword already. This is the one that causes the guards to block the main entrance to Hyrule Castle, meaning the hedge maze and alternate entrance is no longer required, saving a ton of time overall. Other clips were found as well in the Palace of Winds and Dark Hyrule Castle thanks to Solidified Gaming. Known as stair clips, these are similar in a way where there's a very slim gap in the wall and the player can just get out of bounds. All that's needed here is a precise lineup with the stair wall, and you can just dash your way past several rooms in both of these dungeons. All of these clips resulted in huge time saves in the run, bringing the top any percent time down to a 131 within 5 months of these out of bounds clips being found. However, there was one more major clip that would be found by Solidified Gaming, and it would cause the final route split as of the writing of this video. This is Octoclip, one of the hardest tricks ever to be discovered in Minish Cap speedrunning. This is a trick that involves something else discovered by Solidified Gaming called an Ocarina Boost. If you use your shield against an enemy or something that can knock you back, then play the ocarina on the very next frame after the knockback starts, you'll lose collision and you can move through any object as you're sliding. By using this in combination with pots that can fly at you in the main chamber of the Temple of Droplets, a very precise death and fairy revival while pushing a pot allows you to set up an ocarina boost past the wall, letting you get into the trigger for the Octo boss fight without hitting any of the switches. This saved nearly 3 minutes over not doing it, cutting out various parts of the Temple of Droplets. Initially, this wasn't considered to be RTA viable, but thanks to Vlack's efforts, that changed within a month of the trick being discovered. So while this trick is pretty difficult, more runners have completed runs of the Octoclip route than the bracelet skip route when that was active. As for the times leading up to the modern day, the P-Hat clip and the subsequently discovered Octoclip allowed the top time to finally come below 1 hour and 30 minutes in the 80% category. This threshold was reached thanks to a runner named TGH, who has top times in a ton of highly competitive speed games. Currently, he's the only one who's obtained a sub 130 and has had several runs into 129, 128, and even the 127 range. As of the writing of this video, his 127.40 sits at the top of the leaderboard. There have been several more glitches found and documented by the community since this was done, but overall there have been no changes to the routes as of right now. With that being said, that is the history of the route defining glitches in Minish Cap speedrunning. If you learned something and want to see more content like this, subscribe to the channel because it really helps me out. I want to give a big thank you to Myth197 for his massive effort in documenting the history of the Minish Cap speedrunning community, because writing this video would not have gone as smoothly without his documentation on hand. Also, please check out the SpeedDocs Minish Cap any % world record history videos if you want more information on the records and narratives of the community's history. Anyways, that's all from me. Stay hydrated, folks, and thank you so much for watching.